Hello, my name is Callisa. Welcome to Busy Reading Romantasy. I still don't have a written intro. Maybe I'll never have a written intro. Maybe this will just evolve into something slightly more intentional. We'll see. Such exciting new stuff. I have a new setup today, if you couldn't tell. Which is crazy because my camera's here, but my laptop is here. My mic is here, my water's here. Um, So just 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 playing around, just playing around with the angles. So if you actually have watched my first episode, my very first episode, I literally say like I have no intention of doing episodes alone. Guess what I'm doing? An episode alone. That is intentional, and I will explain why. But if you've clicked on this episode, you probably already have an idea why. So I just went to Smut Lovers in Orlando 2024, and I was too excited not to share about it. So that being said, this is the part where I give a disclaimer. This is mature content, right? If you're related to me, Grandpa, probably not the episode you'd like to watch. And the last disclaimer I want to give is that I am also very new on my education journey in terms of the world of kink, BDSM, all these things. So it is not my intention to educate you on this episode. My intention is just to share this conference, the things that got me interested, the things that got me intrigued, the things that got me thinking, in hopes that either I can inspire other people that this is not such a scary, crazy thing. Um, and that being said, because I am new, if I give any wrong information, please gently correct me. I'm absolutely open to that. I'm going to try my best to regurgitate information in an accurate way. But things happen, and sometimes words don't come out quite as I intend them to. So just please, like, everyone is learning in this situation. So I just that felt very important to me. Where to start? Okay, so the conference was Wednesday to Sunday, and so originally I imagined doing this episode talking about all the things that I have learned with a friend of mine. However, due to her job, she just wanted to keep her identity safe, which is totally valid, and I completely understand. Thus, I am doing this episode alone, which makes me really sad that this continues to be a thing, a taboo thing that we can't talk about. um, I think no, I'm gonna end that thought there. Um, I had so much fun, first and foremost. Let me bring out my notes because there is quite a lot of them. Okay. Um, where to start? First of all, Smut Lovers, bravo as far as conventions go. It's a really new one. This was only the second year that they held it. I didn't get to go last year because tickets sold out. Tickets also sold out again this year. So just a heads up if you're interested in going. I have already got my tickets for next year because I want to go again. um, the check-in process was really great. It was a bit lengthy, but I think I came just when everybody else came, which was like slightly after the start of registration. They had name tags that you could create yourself and give you pronoun options as well as distancing options, stickers that you could add to your badge to just indicate whether you would like some space, whether you wanted hugs, how you would prefer to be acknowledged, and all of those cool things. And honestly, one of the best parts is that had at that point I was by myself. My friend couldn't come until later in the conference, and at that point, had I not known anybody, I would have just grabbed my bag and gone back to my room, which was what I intended to do. And instead, I ended up making a really great friend that I think is going to be a lifelong friend, which is really exciting. And we ended up spending the next few days together, and that was awesome to just like meet one person and have such an instant connection and openness in conversation due to the subject matter of what we were learning throughout the week. So we ended up talking all day, well, all evening, and then I went back to my room, obviously, to sleep. Now starts the 2 days of education. There's 2 days of education, panels, all of that. And then the third day is even some more education, but that is the main like book signing, after party, all those more social events. Another note as far as Smut Lovers conference, they had two individuals who are actually part of their accommodations team. So if you needed any sort of accommodations, you could reach out to them, which I think is just beyond amazing. They had like fidgets and things, earplugs in the back of the room if you wanted them at any point, which again is just super cool and handy. And like when you're sitting there all day, like I should have grabbed a fidget, but I kept forgetting. So that's me. So let me back up. What am I even thinking? What is Smut Lovers? Smut Lovers is a conference that, in my own words, feels like it is geared towards authors to provide education around writing smut. It's so valid with all the discussions and the controversy and everything we're seeing now, especially as it relates to dark romance. And just smut in general, there tends to be a big divide because it is a taboo subject, and there is always concerns around people being exposed to content and then bringing what they're learning into real life. Although I would argue that's applicable for like movies, video games, like books. It's all content media that we are consuming. And unfortunately, you cannot always ensure that everyone is going to then use that, like, use proper discretion and safety to bring it into your own life, which I think is just interesting that we're still having to have that conversation. Common sense is just never going to be a thing for everyone, I guess. So that being said, accommodations, I loved it. And then also the other aspect is that, especially when it comes to um how do I want to say this? There's another point that I'm thinking I'm going to bring up after, actually. I'm going to come back to this point. So it kicks off with the keynote speaker, Moxie Rose, and it was such a great way to just kick off the whole thing. I do think it was very interesting that, especially when it comes to um, fantasy, it kind of compartmentalizes what reality can be. So, especially what I tend to read is heavily in the realm of like vampires, werewolves, paranormal, extra powers. That makes it harder to bring those scenes into real life. But if you are reading other types of romance, forgive me, like one thing that I am terrible at is all the different genres and what they mean. I literally looked up what contemporary romance was last week because I just don't I don't know what to call things. Um so when you remove those elements and it's things that can physically happen in real life, I wonder if there is a correlation, causation in terms of people trying things out, um, and bringing those fictional elements into real life. So I thought that was an interesting viewpoint, as well as there was a really heavy emphasis on not placing blame on authors for writing things that could potentially be dangerous, writing things that might be an inaccurate representation. It felt important to have a tone of, we're here to educate you and like help you grow and like just make your writing better. Not even that. No, take that back. It just felt such warm, and like we're not like, don't feel bad if you've written something that was maybe inaccurate or wasn't that like great. All of that's like a very subjective term. Um we're all here to just explore this and do better as a whole, which, as not an author, still felt incredibly valid because I want to do better at facilitating the conversations about books, right? I want to talk about them. So that education was just as important to me to know what to call things, how does it work safely in real life, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So now I feel better prepared to have conversations about books and maybe highlight certain aspects that I wouldn't even have realized before getting all the education that I've received. Then after that lovely keynote, we hop right into BDSM 101 with Princess Rara. I thought it was interesting how she mentioned the common phrasing used to be safe, sane, consensual, which when you step back, most of the things can't ever really be fully safe, as well as what are we doing that's actually sane when it comes to these types of things. So a big one was RAC and prick are the two new acronyms. I forget what prick is, but RAC is risk aware consensual kink. So that is consensual, that part is stays the same, that's very important, but that you are it's not going to be safe, so are you at least aware of the risks of what you're doing. She mentioned a few things that she often sees in books that people get wrong, or just things that she wish she saw more often. Things like when you're having a scene, you can't negotiate upwards. You can negotiate downwards, but you can't be like mid scene and be like, actually, I want more. If you said you were only going to get X amount of whatever part of safety. Also, another great point is that she mentioned that she wanted to see authors writing about newbies who were getting their information from multiple sources. When you enter into this world as someone new and all of a sudden you are getting your information just from one person, usually like the dominant or the top in the situation, that is going to set you up for super manipulation because you just don't know any better. So I thought that was an important piece, is like learn from multiple places, because we don't want to get taken advantage of, we don't want to be manipulated, and unfortunately, as in any demographic, you are going to find icky people that try to manipulate and just aren't the best human beings. So, getting your information from multiple places is going to be helpful. Quick side note as far as terminology goes, I think from my understanding, sub and dom and bottom and top had kind of been used interchangeable. However, I learned that dom and sub relate to a relationship dynamic that can be long term or like a set amount of time, versus top and bottom is scene specific, and it is if you're topping, you are giving, and if you're bottoming, you are receiving. So, little stuff like that. It's important to know your terminology. Um, and another really big part is safe word, using your safe word, safe wording. Safe wording does not mean failure. There can be a lot of hesitancy of not wanting to fail, not wanting to give up. And I thought it was important. Another important piece, which, come to think of it, I don't think I have yet read a book where they have used the safe word, a safe word. Um, so I'm looking forward to the day that I have access to that, because yeah, if you are constantly reading about people who just take everything that's been given to them, again, you might want to hold out, and that can be unsafe. That can not only be unsafe for the person who chooses not to use the safe word, but that is also um, dangerous for the person who's topping, who is giving in that scene because of the um, mental effects of potentially hurting someone when they don't use the safe word, and also very much like legal effects. The accidents happen, things happen, and I thought it was really important. They actually mentioned this right after this class. We had a Dom panel and a sub panel, and actually not after this one, after the next one. We had a Dom and sub panel, and they also mentioned how important it is to use the safe word to protect your top, your dom type, whatever the relationship is like. So you can see at this point already, I'm learning so much, and I just think it's so cool. All the little intricacies. Um, it really, I felt like I said the whole time, I felt like a kid in the candy store because I was like, ooh, what's this? Ooh, let me try this. Ooh, let me learn about this. 'Cause it's just fascinating, and you wanna see, like, what are you into? What are you not into? I don't know. Okay. Next was BDSM 201, the next kind of step up, and that is where what I took away from that one is going back to kind of the dynamics. They mentioned that, like, punishments punishments aren't punishments. If you make it fun and enjoyable, it's not a punishment because it doesn't discourage the behavior. And you don't always need punishments. You can have dynamics where there's reward only. Like, I think a common misconception about this world is just I just picture, like, all this, like, smacking and hitting and, like, physical stuff, um, and that's why it has to be talked about, it has to be negotiated, it has to be crystal clear, because there is a line, and obviously it needs to all be consensual, so I thought it was interesting that they brought up that if a submissive breaks a rule or something, the submissives themselves can be very hard on themselves, and their mind will almost like punish them enough. So a physical punishment is a way for a dominant to um like, end the situation. We've done it, you've been punished, like, we're not gonna talk about this again, and, like, love them after. I thought that was cool too. Now they did mention another dynamic around rituals and protocols, which are just agreed upon rules, and one of the panelists mentioned that there's minute ways to say, I love you, I care about you, and I'm following these rules for a reason in public. So it doesn't look like anything inherently taboo. Like it's nothing crazy, but that's been a agreed upon, negotiated thing beforehand, such as like when he's up and walking around, she is right next to him, not, anywhere else. Or, she might hand him water a specific way. And personally, I loved that. I feel comfortable with rules, clarity, knowing exactly where you stand, and that's just me. I know other people that would be like, "Fuck that! You think I'm gonna be right next to you, following you, doing everything you say." Like, I get both sides of it, and it really, like I said, the whole slogan of the weekend is kink is customizable. You do what's right for you, you don't do what's right for you. It is what it is. Um on the dub blah, blah, blah. On the Dom panel, I thought it was really interesting that a lot of the discussion centered around some new terms for you, subspace and Dom space, as well as sub drop and Dom drop. So again, from what I understand, which is very inexperienced, when a sub is Most like well, okay, so subs can get into this place called subspace where all of the dopamine, all the chemicals are really just rushing and floating. And what they said was that it kind of feels like you're out in like the ether, just like enjoying that space. Your overthinking brain turns off, you're just floating there. Dom space, they said, is a little bit different because it's not triggered by chemicals released, but it is a type of hyper focus. You're locked in, you're reading the body language, reading the scene, making the choices. Um, so I thought that was pretty interesting, as well as sub and dom drop, which usually happens, I guess it could happen during, but more likely after a scene. Um, and I put down that it sounds like what I have learned in my like group therapy, group coaching, life therapy situation as kind of like a vulnerability hangover. I don't know that that's necessarily an accurate or fair comparison, but in my brain, that's what it was closest to, was that you are floating high on all of these chemicals. You've gone way up at some time, and sometimes like there is a real not risk, but a chance that you go down after. And that's where things like aftercare are very important, where you know that you're loved, you're cared for. And this goes for, again, I think it tends to focus on the sub, but they mentioned like doms can do that too, where like um doms are people too, which I might need on a shirt. Is what they mentioned. So again, those are from what I understand, but I am very inexperienced. So like please go do your own research. I found this stuff really interesting. Sub-panel, they mentioned kink is therapeutic, it is not therapy, okay? So you cannot, like, just start doing all the stuff and, like, get cured. It can be helpful with certain situations, but it's not going to encompass the entirety of helping any sort of, mental health or past experiences and stuff like that, and that is part of just, again, uh educating and explaining what exactly kink is. There was one around safety, and I thought it was interesting that one person mentioned that they always safe word early in their very first scene, um, where they're not at their limits, but they do it just to ensure one that the new person they are doing a scene with it stops and like takes care of them, and for their own safety. You don't want to get to a point where you really do need to stop and the person is not stopping. So I thought that was great for like a first time newbie situation, as well as another person mentioned there can be opt in or opt out dynamics. So opting in would mean everything is a no until I say yes. I'm opting into everything specifically, versus an opt out, which is I am a yes to everything until I say no. So two different dynamics. Again, you need to learn what's going to work best for you. What flavor do you enjoy? Before and aftercare panel, again, reinforcing that you are more than just this scene. You know, doms don't want to be seen as these I don't even want to say any like bad words, but like eh, vicious, not vicious, not aggressive. They don't want to be seen like that because that's what, if you don't know, if you don't know the dynamic, if you don't know what's been agreed upon, if you don't know what they have or haven't done before, but you're just watching it, like you just don't know their situation or how it's been constructed. So that ends day one of education. It's Thursday. We have a field trip. Where did we go to a field trip? The Woodshed in Orlando, which is a dungeon. I was so nervous. Let me tell you. And it was a demo night. It wasn't even open to like the general public. It was just for us to go in. We have 2 hours in this dungeon, and um to basically just kind of sample and ask questions and learn more about a bunch of different implements. This would be considered this I don't think a demo would be considered pickup play, but it is very similar to pickup play where you are meeting someone for the first time and consensually doing something. You didn't have to try anything out. You could watch the whole time, and there's a bunch of little stations, so you just kind of go where things interested you. There was never like too much focus on any one thing. So the first thing that I demoed was fire. I started it started pretty high. And it in my head, I was a little nervous. I was a little scared. Um and we were made aware of all of the risks and I consented to trying it out in which they put they like dabbed some like alcohol on your arm and then lit it and then wiped it out immediately. And it is funny because in my brain, I was scared. I did not want to put my arm out there, and then I just, like, did it. You turn your brain off, "Whoop, let me try." And obviously, I did not get hurt. It does feel warm for a second. It did not burn. I did not feel any sort of discomfort, but that's part of it, right? Fear is part of the play. It can be, it doesn't have to be. Again, it's customizable. After I got lit on fire, I was like, "You know what? This is great." I go to the next station, electricity. Let's try it out. I held the probe in my right hand and you can control it with a dial. So at first, it's just nice little tingles and you can hear it. You can hear like the static. It's kind of like static shock. And then there's all these different tools laid out, right? And the person was like, "Is do any of those interest you?" Literally, I point to one little tool that looks like, a little wheel with all these, like, spokes in it. It looks like a Play-Doh tool, and I was like, "Ooh, that one looks fun," and she goes, "Oh, so that's, like, more advanced?" I was like, "Oh, okay, so what would you recommend since I chose wrong?" Um, and so we tried out a few different, sensations. One was like a metal knitting needle. So at first, it's cool because there's different levels of it, right? So without changing the dial of how much electricity was flowing through my body, at first she took the knitting needle sideways, long ways, and rubbed it down my arm so there was more surface area versus the back of the knitting needle, which was like a flat tip that was more focused. And then I tried the tip of the knitting needle, which was the smallest bit, and that was like a nice little boop. um, Again, it did not hurt, it was not painful, it was merely just an introduction to trying something out. Boom, bam, did those 2. What's next, you ask? Flogging. Tried that out on the flogging bench. I hmm. This is where I decide how many details I wanna give you. This is where I decide how many details I wanna give you about my life. Um, the flogging was fine. I also decided to try out a paddle. Okay. So then I decided to try out a flogging, a paddle, and a meat tenderizer. And just different sensations, different things. Did I get a little bruised from that? Yeah. Um, was it interesting to experience? Yeah. Do I now get to sit and decide moving forward what I like to experience in life? Absolutely. So I left the demo night feeling very proud, very accomplished of myself. Proud girl, was very brave, tried stuff out, which is exactly what I wanted to do. I was there to experience things, right? In an educational environment that mitigated risk. I keep wanting to say safe, and I'm like, you can't say that. um, so very proud of that. Went to bed. Friday, more panels. This one, we started out with impact, 9 a.m. in the morning, impact class with Rue. Biggest one, watch out for organs, okay? Also, bones. Be careful. Don't be hitting that stuff. Know your stuff because you can really hurt people. It's not great. She said nothing hard where like a suit of armor bends. So like obviously just be very careful for all your like little nooks and crannies. Um, she also mentioned when it comes to the behind, there's a little sweet spot, right? I think she said people tend to go higher for like the meat of the booty, but if you want them to think about you when they're trying to sit down the next day, there's that little smile where their butt cheek meets their thigh, and like that's a little sweet spot. You also do want to be careful if you go any higher of the tailbone as well. So like things to consider. Also, I think this is where I want to pause because I think there's another misconception of people just like wailing on people. Not the most accurate. There's a lot of care. I'll get more into that later of what my eyeball saw. Then we did ethical bratting with Rara again. She said that there's different I thought this one was fun. She's fun, and she has a podcast called Pink Kink, which I highly recommend you check out if this is all interesting for you. That is a source of information that you should get. Um, but she mentioned that there's different ways to brat, and like, how do you brat ethically, right? You don't need to be rude and disrespectful, especially in public. I liked that there can be a dynamic, an agreed upon dynamic of bratting in private, but maybe you just don't do that in a public place because that can be seen. If people don't know what your dynamic is, that can be seen as extremely rude or disrespectful and all of that. Um, Also, my favorite point was that was malicious compliance. So finding loopholes, right? You can tell me to drink my water, but if you don't tell me exactly how much or how I have to drink it, I can maliciously comply by drinking coffee because that has ice cubes, that has water in it, right? So I thought that was a fun and sweet way of like, there is a line, and that is something that should also be negotiated beforehand. That's another big part. Negotiating. Talk everything through. What is okay? What isn't okay? How do you feel about it? If something bad happens, how do you want the person to go about helping you? All those kinds of things. I digress. But anyways, my point is like I would say I think a lot of times I get teased for like flubbing my words or something like that. I would not be okay if you tease me about my weight. I'd probably cry. Don't do that. So talk it all through, but maliciously comply. Then I went to a knife class. This is one where coming from the outside going in, I'm like, this is crazy. Why? Why? I was proved so wrong on why it's not entirely crazy. And the point is, again, because we don't see very much of it, because we don't talk about it, in my head, I'm like, you're slicing each other up. In real life, there are so many different aspects to it. So I don't want to say too much on this just because, again, it is not my place to inform and educate. If this is something that you're interested in, please go educate yourself. But there are a lot of nuances in terms of there's a lot of sensation play with like children's knives, like children's cutting knives, cheese spreaders, things that can't actually cut you. Um, but it's maybe the sensation. So again, mitigating that risk, making it safer, not safe, but safer, um, that you can play with. And it's not this like dramatic slicing you to pieces because that's a lot. Not to yuck anybody's yum. I'm new to all this. We also did take an intro to ropes course, which I have taken actually one rope course before. Shibari is the official name. Ropes course sounds like those like adventure things that you do outside. This is tying up people in case you weren't sure what we were talking about. And they talked about how nerve damage is actually the biggest risk. I think people think like, oh, it's rope, it's not as dangerous. It is incredibly dangerous. If you have it laying on a wrong spot for too long, you can get nerve damage that can have lasting impacts. I did think it was very cool that they mentioned that nerve damage, you're going to start to feel pain in a specific area versus if you've just cut off circulation, it's going to be a bit more dull, and kind of like an encompassing a bigger area. So again, if that is something you are interested in, please get educated. Please make sure you have some scissors, you have a phone nearby, like you're ready just in case anything goes wrong. Also, I thought it was really interesting that she mentioned that that one is very important for bottoms to continually communicate, um, and like checking in and just getting used to using their voice of saying like it feels tough here, right here is comfortable, um, the pressure is too much, too little, like just getting used to checking in. Also, there's a bunch of different types of ropes that all have their pros and cons, depending on what you are looking to do, what you want the texture and feeling versus the like longevity and the cleanliness of different stuff. So like you can see how at this point my brain was literally on information overload. Finally, we get to our last day, our last full day, Saturday. There was demos again in the morning from the Woodshed. This one I went for a round two and I got to try out some new stuff so I can actually officially add three different types of canes, the violet wand, which is more electricity, whips, well, a whip, um, and this like scale mail looking thing and a baton. Again, I was like, let me just try it out. And of course, because these are educated people, there is a amount of trust. There is even communication where they would check in with me. How is that feeling? And they're not just going in and going wham, bam, thank you, ma'am. They are very light, just getting a feel for what these implements can do. Interestingly, I thought the canes was like a conversation around do you like more thuddy things or stingy things? Because that's like two different sensations. So, again, the purpose of this is to educate writers to help write realistic or accurate sensations, feelings, play, scenes, all that kind of stuff. Um, After that, we enter the book signing, and that was bonkers. I had never been to a book signing before, but there was like 105 tables, and that was just pure madness. First of all, I now have a cup with 50 million bookmarks, so I'm never gonna not need a bookmark. Um, that all say fun things because we get to be ourselves in this space. This is my new pile of stickers, which is a ridiculous amount of stickers that also say great things. We love a feral, we love a feral fictional man. Good, I just wanted to make sure it focused. A whole bunch. I could not let myself buy a single book because I just was not prepared for that and the amount of money that I could have easily spent there. Everyone was so nice. I've never talked to so many people in such a short amount of time. It literally took us 2 hours, and that was quickly visiting each book without even doing any like signings. I think I said visiting each book, but I know you knew that I meant booth. Um, and I didn't do any signings, nothing. You get a lot of like free swag, but it is cool because I did take pictures of all the authors I want to revisit. I want to read their work. I would love to get them on the podcast talking about all these sorts of things. Um, that was exhausting. We literally left and went and took a nap because that was tiresome. Um, and then we got ready for the Moulin Rouge after party. There was a dinner buffet. We had performers. and they were ballet dancers. I got my tarot read, beautiful. We saw a rope scene played out, and we also saw an impact scene. That scene was 30 minutes long, and let me just say my jaw was on the floor. It was beautiful. The dynamic was beautiful. And that brings me to my last point. Again, there, I think, are so many misconceptions. I think everyone kind of has a perception of what this entails, and a lot of it is harm. What we don't see enough is the tender love and care that happens before and after a scene. And when I say I was about ready to start crying at the end of this scene because of the care and sweetness and gentleness that they showed each other, like, I think that is a fundamental part that is missing. It is a negotiated thing that has been agreed upon, right? It is a consensual. They have probably gone into detail about everything that can and cannot happen, right? And then it's this, I don't necessarily think that it has to be love all the time, but I want to call it love. Like, it feels like there's a level of care and a level of responsibility of like, I'm going to care for you. I'm going to take care of you. I'm going to respect you. And there's like an interesting dynamic where you are agreeing to these things because you trust that this person has your care in interest, whatever your goal may be. I think another common misconception is that kink and sex go hand in hand. And that was actually one that I came into this with. Leaving it, I can see the total separation of it. It's like a Venn diagram. They can be overlapped, but they can also not be at all. And again, it's different from everybody. What kind of maybe mental release they're looking for, or like there could be a wide number of reasons why they're agreeing to do what they do. It's just crazy to me that it's like looked down upon when this is generally a practice where it should be talked about and agreed upon beforehand. Um, it blows my mind. Not really. I know why people um I think you get what I'm trying to say, really. Which, like, circling back to one of the points that I mentioned at the beginning that I would save it for later, but the other big note of this is that you cannot give consent when you have had any alcohol. So I thought that brought an interesting tone to someone like me who does like to drink and go out and have fun. Um, I only had 3 drinks total this whole weekend because anytime we're going to the woodshed, we had to agree that we were not consuming any alcohol. And I thought that was so cool because we're doing things that, like, when you are new to it, it is scary and it's different and you don't know what you're doing and you're walking into this new world where you don't know the rules, and um it's vulnerable. It's really freaking vulnerable. And so to not even use the excuse of like, let me just have a drink so I can relax or calm down. It felt very empowering to do it all completely sober. So that was another just like side point. And again, zooming out on the event as a whole, this is literally the biggest. So I did pay for the VIP ticket, which came with a swag bag that literally had a ridiculous amount of stuff. These are all the free books that I got for this event alone, which is wild to me. So I know that I wanted to film this episode, and like I said, my intent was not necessarily to educate, um, but more kind of share the things that sparked my curiosity and continue the conversation. Hopefully I did a good job. I would like to recognize in myself the vulnerability of talking about these things. Um, I get nervous. I get nervous of how it's gonna be perceived. I get nervous of how others perceive me, the assumptions they may have about me, which is silly, but I'm human and that is what it is. I do have a passion for learning and just being human and curious, and this is a community that I have now found myself in and felt safe in, um, to just explore those interests. Everyone was so incredibly kind this whole weekend, all of the educators. It just blew all of my expectations out of the water. A phenomenal event, and I'm really excited to see how it grows. I already got my tickets to next year, like I said. Now that I'm maybe a little bit more educated, I'm excited to come back next year and probably just meet people and talk a little bit more than I did last year. This year, I definitely kind of kept to myself because I was busy learning and trying stuff out. So, um, I don't know. I'm curious what your thoughts are. Was there anything that particularly surprised you, maybe misconceptions that you had, or anything in books that you've seen done really well? I obviously didn't even make it to all the panels, so I'm very excited. I think there's recordings offered, maybe. So, like, I'm excited to see those whenever they become available. And yeah, I don't know what more there is to say about that. We did it, guys. If you've made it this far, thank you so much. I know this is a bit outside of anything I've done before, even if you knew me from the previous podcast. But that is my goal, is to follow my joy, follow my interests, follow my curiosity, and help facilitate these conversations. I'm just a nerd, really, when it comes down to it. I just like learning and talking about these things. So, so that being said, I would really appreciate it if you gave me a follow, whether that's on Spotify, if you subscribe to me on YouTube. I'm on Instagram and TikTok. My Instagram and TikTok do tend to get slightly different content sometimes, so I do advise follow me on both if you want. Um, and yeah, like I said, let's keep the conversation going. If you are an author that wants to be a part of this conversation, I'm definitely interested. Please reach out to me. And I'm excited for next year. All right. I still don't have an outro technically, so we're gonna end it. We're gonna end it there. Thanks for watching.